Long to reign over them. Examining the appeal of the British royal family as Elizabeth II celebrates 65 years on the throne. And kings, queens, sultans, emperors and emirs. A regal tour of the world's other 25 remaining monarchies. I'm Martin Stanford. This is Inside. Welcome to Inside. There were celebrations in Britain this week to mark 65 years on the throne for Queen Elizabeth II. She's the longest reigning monarch in the country's history, and polls say she remains popular among the majority of people in the United Kingdom. The appeal appears to go well beyond the kingdom. People in more than 180 countries watched the wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton. Insight's Tygen Wright has been finding out why.
In her 65 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth II has seen 13 British Prime Ministers, the same number of US Presidents, and 7 Popes. This 41-gun salute on Monday marks the anniversary of her accession. This, the only formality, because it's also the anniversary of her father, King George's, premature death. Elizabeth is the only Queen of England that most of her subjects, and in fact, most of the world, has ever known. She reigns over the 16 countries that remain in the British Commonwealth, so perhaps little surprise that hers is the most renowned monarchy on the planet.
There's a lot of movies, TV series, and before coming here, I watched some of them.
It's a special fact that here is a monarchy, and it's interesting for us.
To be honest, it doesn't really concern me at all. Like, they have their own thing over here, and if that's the way they want to do it, that's the way they want to do it.
Leave the politics to the politicians, but I wish we had a king. I really do. Be somebody to watch over us, and we don't have that.
The crown has landed on my head.
Their lives are followed like a soap opera. Their story so compelling that the streaming giant Netflix made them the subject of the most expensive television series that's ever been made. Closer to home, a minority of Britons oppose the monarchy and aren't afraid to say so. But even those on the fence accept they represent an important part of the British brand.
I think really most people are probably indifferent about the royals, but because they are almost interwoven into the fabric of British society, there's a sense that they're there and they're here to stay, and there's nothing that anyone can do to change that.
So why do you think they've been able to cultivate this international following?
They have made themselves very well travelled. So if you look at all of the Commonwealth countries, they are regularly visited, not just by the Queen. They've actually had lesser royals go to very far-flung destinations. I think equally, they have a bit of a stardust about them. They are almost up there with the A-listers as far as perhaps celebrity is concerned. So then they've had a lot of magazine and newspaper coverage around the world, which again keeps the popularity and the interest alive. Because of Princess Diana obviously being universally a very globally recognised figure, we had a little bit of a lull when she died, and now I think that there's a sense that William, Kate and Harry have kind of replicated her popularity. And you look at somebody like Kate, she is a cover girl.
For fans of the British monarchy, the past few years have been eventful. The fairy tale wedding of the heir to the throne, Prince William, to his wife Catherine, started to paint a picture of what the future will look like. Then little Prince George and little Princess Charlotte made the picture complete. Theirs appears to be a genuine love match, a fairy tale that people can actually believe in. The same can't be said for the generation before. The next king, Prince Charles, married Diana because she was a young, single, aristocratic woman. His true love, Camilla, was already married. The way their divorce was handled and Diana's sudden and shocking death triggered a wave of revulsion against the royal family. Did it change the machine that surrounds the royals?
Princess Diana, both in life and in death, has changed the machine around the monarchy because they've realised they need to be far more touchable and engage with the people. And actually, if you think about the palace behind me, in days gone by, ordinary members of the public like you and I wouldn't have got into those gates. It would have been, you know, society people, heads of state, other presidents and prime ministers from around the world. Nowadays, Buckingham Palace is the people's palace.
At 90 years of age, Britain is all too aware of Queen Elizabeth's advancing years. Matching her steady and at times dispassionate service could prove difficult for her successor, Charles, who wears his passions on his sleeve. The institution knows it's supposed to remain neutral on politics, except in the most extreme of circumstances, and that's how it survived in the democratic age. At regular intervals at royal palaces, ceremonial soldiers performed the changing of the guard with clockwork precision. In increasingly uncertain times, a healthy dose of predictability could be the royals' most redeeming feature. Ty Genwright, reporting for Insight.
Well, we're joined in the studio by Camilla Tominey, who you saw in that report, a royal journalist and columnist, and also joining us is Richard Fitzwilliams, a royal commentator. Camilla, is it a matter of sheer longevity, which would be remarkable under any circumstances, or is it that she's still doing a good job?
I think it's a little bit of both. Obviously, the institution of monarchy has been a part of British society for as long as anyone can remember before that, and has been interwoven into all of our history, and it's probably part of what makes us famous overseas, this notion of having such a strong tie to the crown. Equally, though, because she's been on the throne for 65 years now, there's a sense that British life is intertwined with Queen Elizabeth II, and throughout that time, I would say that she has been a great moderniser. So although we now see her as an elderly lady, she's in her 90s, there's a sense that she has still brought the House of Windsor up to date. And we've seen, for instance, in recent years, a whole website, an online presence for the royal family that wasn't around before. And that's very much to connect with the next generation. I think the Queen understands that she's passing on the mantle, not just to Charles, but also to William, Harry and Kate, and that they need to be equally popular for the monarchy to survive into the 21st century. And there's this sense that, yes, actually, because they're a bit more touchable and perhaps they wear their hearts on their sleeves a little more than the Queen, the younger royals are helping to reinvigorate interest in monarchy in this country and overseas.
But that's a difficult act to get right, isn't it, Richard? Because if you become too much like a regular celebrity or a politician and not special, then why should we treat them as royal anymore?
Because, in fact, we are the world's highest profile royal family. That is one reason. The other reason is the benefits that monarchy brings. I mean, if you look, for example, as the Queen as a projector of soft power, if you think, as Camilla was mentioning, she's in her 90s. Well, she was 85 when she visited Ireland in 2011, and I think that trip was one of the highlights of her reign. I mean, at the moment, especially with British politics so unstable at a period of Brexit, something that embodies stability and continuity like the monarchy is, I think, especially important. And if you consider also the Commonwealth, the link there, I mean, the Queen has always been devoted to this organisation of 52 countries, far more so than some of her prime ministers.
But her critics, Camilla, said that's a throwback to the days of British Empire, you know, when Britain ran half the world or something like that. That surely is an anachronism these days.
Well, I know that that's the sense of our history, but I think people accept now that the Queen is more like a figurehead and, of course, has no political impetus, really, when she gives the Queen's speech in Parliament.
Well, officially she doesn't. But as Richard was alluding to, maybe she has influence.
Well, she has some soft power influence on Britain's global standing, and certainly I think the royals open doors unlike any other. So if you've got a royal going out to the Middle East, for instance, then arguably the door will be open for somebody like the Duke of York and not, for instance, for Boris Johnson. But at the same time, I think we accept that really the Queen's role is ceremonial now. You know, gone are the days of Elizabeth I and Henry VIII and all the rest of it. I think it's a positive boon for Britain that you have this globally recognised figure who has this history of being completely stalwart and not really putting a foot wrong. It makes us seem quite reliable and to be trusted. I think there's a trust element that the royal family add.
And in this rather rather bizarre concoction we've come up with of a constitutional monarchy, with an awful lot of it not written down anywhere, Richard. It's sort of passed on from generation to generation. The idea that the leader of our country, prime ministers past and present, have a senior mentor to go and have a private conversation with. It's quaint, but it's quite effective.
Yes, exactly. It works. That's the test. And what's more, it's popular. If you look at the Ipsos Mori polls over the last 20 years, you'll find that the lowest points, obviously in the 1990s, but subsequently, I think that there has been a tremendous change, not only looking forward, but you're also looking at the benefits. For example, when members of the royal family go abroad, the benefit is often to British trade as well as the host countries. The charitable benefits, absolutely enormous if you consider the numbers of engagements members of the royal family undertake and their links to certain charities. It makes a terrific difference. You could argue parts of it, yes, they go back historically, the traditional aspect of it, the pomp and pageantry, that is of significance. But what's more, people like it. They feel that it does relate to their everyday lives, in the sense that you have stability and continuity at a time of very considerable change, especially now with Brexit.
We do now, but I wonder how fragile the support, Camilla, because as we've noted and Richard alluded to, in the 90s perhaps, or late 80s, when there was multiple divorces going on, affairs going on, you know, the wider extended family were in the newspapers for perhaps the wrong reasons. Support plummeted, didn't it?
Yes, I mean, you'll remember, like the viewers, Martin, the Annus Horribilis of 1992, where the Queen basically had a terrible year. 3 out of 4 children announced their divorces, and the War of the Waleses continued to be all over the newspapers. Very sordid headlines have been written about the royals in the past. However, to be fair, the polling's always been relatively consistent. About 70% of the population in favour, 30% against. There's been peaks and troughs. Again, the aftermath of Princess Diana's death in '97, where the royals were seen to not appropriately react to this global outpouring of grief, didn't come back from Balmoral soon enough, didn't lower the flag over Buckingham Palace, although it had never been lowered for the death of anybody else royal in the past. There was an adapting and a changing, and actually the Queen rescued that situation by changing her own behaviour. She famously addressed the nation, speaking not only as a queen but as a grandmother, and really won people back. So that again showed that she does transcend politics, in that she isn't as self-serving as the average elected official. She's actually very much for the people rather than herself, and she's been respected because she's put duty first. It's not career ambition. Equally, she doesn't smile on ceremony. She isn't jazz-handish like a lot of heads of states that might tour around the world. You know, she just is who she is, and people respect her for that.
Can I just ask you about the A word, abdication, Richard? It's a dirty word in her family, in the sense that, well, she is on the throne because of an example, an event, an abdication event.
And
would she ever do it herself? That's the question.
I think the answer to that is very definitely not. She's a person of deep conviction and deep religious faith. Her belief in God, for example, the fact that this, I think, is behind a lot of what she does and what she feels that she has achieved. I think that she will most emphatically not abdicate, and also the fact that the abdication crisis in the 1930s had so seismic an effect on the monarchy, I think that too would be a matter that would be borne in mind. But clearly, royal duties, as the Queen gets older, are being scaled proportionately. No more long-haul flights, lift use rather than stairs and so on. But it's important to remember that the Queen's last year, 385 engagements, up from 337 the previous year.
Oh, yeah, there's still a lot of the reigning Queen in her just yet. OK, stay with us on Insight. Coming up in the next part of our programme, we're going to have a look at some of the other royal families right around the globe.